Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I don't know, I think it's my fourth or fifth attempt on my channel to do a SitRep. I've done a couple with Gordon, a couple with Colonel Towner-Watkins. Both of them are joining me this evening. Welcome.
Hi.
Hey, Brady. Thanks for having me.
And my audience is familiar with both of you, but for the new watchers, why don't you, real quick, we've got the Colonel Towner-Watkins, who's become a very good friend. She spent 30 years working with the U.S. military intelligence, has an MBA in finance, I believe, and is one sharp cookie, and has spent an awful lot of time telling the internet world about Operation Gladio and associated events. You want to add anything to that?
Well, actually, I did not have a career in intelligence.
Oh, sorry.
I was assigned to bases whose primary missions was intelligence. So I'm very familiar with how that works in the Air Force.
Well, it still made you pretty knowledgeable on the subject, but thanks for the correction.
Sure.
And also with us is my good friend Gordon, also known as the Ghost of Base Patrick Henry. Gordon is a regular host and writer for Badlands Media. And he and I have, we've been friends for 3 or 4 years now and have had a lot of these conversations offline. And we've started to have a lot of really good time having these conversations online. He is one of the best researchers I know and a very good friend. Gordon, did I miss anything?
I think you hit it all, man. Yeah,
right.
happy to be here.
Is it my notifications that are beeping or somebody else's that's blown out my ears?
It's yours probably. It's not mine.
I could have sworn I just shut them off, but we'll try to get through it. I shouldn't expect too many more emails this time of night. Well, generally speaking, on these sit reps, what we talk about is what are the hotspots going on in the world, and with the overview is, we talk about how the U.S. government's foreign policy has inherited the empire or the imperial designs and plans and tactics of the former British Empire and other European imperial nations. We try to tie it all together. We love our country. We're all Americans. We're not really crazy with our government's foreign policy over the last century or so. And one of the things we like to do is expose the truth and what's happened over the last century plus and what's going on today. And hopefully we become better because of it. Fair enough?
I agree.
Definitely.
Well, there's a lot going on this week. It feels like we could do like a 4-hour show to cover everything. But the two hotspots tonight we're going to get to is Turkey and also a recent attempted coup in the Republic of Congo. We're going to start with Turkey because the last sit rep I did with Colonel Towner, we talked about Georgia. And what's going on there is their country is trying to pass something that's very similar to an American law known as the FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act, where foreign NGOs actually have to register. If you have over 20% funding in the country for an NGO, you have to tell people where your money is coming from. Transparency. Well, and I'll share a screen right now. That's become a really big deal. Apparently, that's controversial. And it shouldn't be, but it is. What we're seeing right now is Europe is ready to play hardball with Georgia. This is the country of Georgia that sits right on the border of Russia, surrounded by some other very interesting countries, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and not too far away, Iran. All these are major chess pieces in the global Game of Thrones. And it's interesting that a law that the United States has on its own books is really upsetting us and the EU when it comes to these other countries that apparently are pawns in the global game. I bring that up as a segue into Turkey because it seems that Erdogan and Turkey, among other countries, is considering similar acts. And I guess the big picture is a lot of these other countries in the world are starting to figure out exactly how the United States, CIA, State Department, and non-government organizations have been funneling money and influence into their countries to do regime change. And I think it's, I asked the question to both of these two via text and other conversations over the last week. Is Turkey going to be in play? Is NATO going to say, Turkey, if you enact this law, we're going to have a long conversation? And I think the best way to get to that conversation is to talk a little background of Turkey and how it got involved with NATO. And there are probably not two better people that I know more qualified to give the background information on Turkey and take it to there. And at this point, I am going to zip it and hand it over to both of my experts. And you guys start wherever you want with how it leads into that question.
I'll kick it to you first, Colonel.
Well, no, you go first. You have the more background, and then I will talk about their Gladio setup, which is what they have used throughout all over the world, actually. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So Turkey, it's like modern day Turkey, I would say, just very quickly, is that one of the most diverse cultural places in the world. Basically everything from the Persian Empire to Alexander the Great, which would be the Greek Empire, to the Byzantine Empire, which was kind of the Christian Greek Empire, to the Ottoman Empire, which was Islam, has ruled there from about 1300 until 1917, the end of World War I. The Ottoman Empire ruled Turkey, and basically after World War I, Britain and France kind of took over the Middle East and carved it up. And basically Turkey, as I understand it, was allowed to become its own nation, unlike the other places in the Middle East, which were promised, if they revolted against the Ottomans, they were promised to give in their own sovereignty. And then that was, of course, rug pulled, and they didn't really get that. Turkey, I imagine, probably similar circumstances, but they at least, were to some extent given their sovereignty. And they had a guy who came in the 1920s and did a pretty good job of secularizing their culture and kind of moderating like the Islamic elements in it, and kind of pivoted away from all that stuff. Whereas you saw like the Arabs, they really started to move towards like Orthodox, being pushed in that direction by British intelligence and then later the CIA, towards a more Orthodox, radicalized form of Islam. And so
that would be Muslim Brotherhood.
That would be Muslim Brotherhood. And basically, the story of the Muslim Brotherhood is that in 1902, after being driven out of Riyadh by a rival clan, the Saudis took refuge in Kuwait with the Kuwait royal family for 10 years. And then MBS, who's the current crown prince in Saudi Arabia, he's like around like just under 40 years old. His grandfather at the time was about 25 years old in 1902. And he forms the Muslim Brotherhood to go retake their ancestral homeland from this rival clan. The clan had been sent there by the Ottomans. The Ottomans did not like the Saudis. And basically they defeat these guys, and they spend 25 years conquering all of Arabia. Not conquering, really. The British were helping them. They hooked up with the British in Kuwait. The British start giving them 5,000 guineas per month and say, hey, go out and buy up the loyalty of all these tribes. They do that. The Muslim Brotherhood helps him do that. And then in the 1920s, the British intelligence infiltrates the Muslim Brotherhood and tries to turn them against MBS's grandfather, because they knew that he was not going to allow them to build a railroad across the Middle East from Haifa in modern day Israel to Iraq. And so they wanted to overthrow him. He finds out about it. He forms a new military, basically, like a new militia, destroys the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928. And that exact same year, the British recreate the Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo, Egypt, using schools. Yeah, using schools they had set up in the 1880s and 1890s. And these schools were designed to radicalize the Muslims. They went and found the guys who had the most radical ideas about Islam, who otherwise wouldn't have had a platform, and they basically gave them a bunch of money and the resources to recruit kids and students. And then that model was then copy pasted by Zbigniew Brzezinski in the 1970s.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope they never do that here in America, because that would be awful if our college kids got indoctrinated in any way, shape, or form. But
it's the exact mirror of what we basically saw happen between 1885 and really the modern day throughout the Middle East. Is they did the exact same thing. They just used Islam instead of like the woke radical like culturism. So anyway, that's how the Middle East was radicalized. Turkey, for the most part, was kind of spared of that because they secularized and kind of pivoted away from Islam to a certain extent. Now, under Erdogan, over the past 20 years, they have pivoted kind of back. They've kind of come back a little bit towards like embracing Islam a little more, and that's a lot of that has been the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Is fundamentalism the right term for the shift? Would that be the right term, or?
Yeah, you could say so. They basically Wahhabism was a cornerstone of the Saudi culture, that was begun in 1744. That was when the Saudi ruling state was formed. It was a partnership between the original patriarch of the Saudi royal family and this other guy named Al-Wahhab, who was this radical, orthodox thinker, like theologian, who had these ideas that were so crazy his own family disowned him and basically sent him off into the desert and were like, you can't be a part of our family. We disown you now, because his ideas were so radical. Let's go stone women to death for engaging in whatever. Yeah. So, and then of course his ideas became even more were radicalized by people after him. So it's he had ideas that were radical, and then every person after him kind of built on top of his ideas. And so then the British found these people and were like, oh, this is great. Let's codify this into a curriculum, and then we can teach people how to be radicalized. So that's really how the Middle East became where it is right now. I mean, if you could imagine, there was a woman, Gertrude Bell, who traveled around for 26 years by herself. She's called the female Lawrence of Arabia. She was working for the British intelligence, working for the British government, and basically traveled around the Middle East, mostly Iraq, from 1901 until about 1926, 27. I think is when she died. She overdosed on pills. They think it may have been a suicide due to a love interest gone wrong. But anyway. She traveled around for 26 years by herself as a woman in the Middle East and never had any issues. Never was arrested, never was raped, never was mugged. So the Middle East was a very different place 100 years ago. I just think it's important to point that out. But yeah.
So we get to World War II, and I think Turkey's interesting because they were officially neutral, yet they were cooperative both with both the Allies, both different sides of they were cooperative with the Nazis, they were cooperative with the Allies, and came out of World War II relatively unscathed. And in 1952, they joined NATO. And that's where we kind of have to pass the baton to the colonel, because it gets fun.
And I do want to make a note of something that Gordon covered. I found it fascinating in reading the history of the Middle East, especially the creation of Israel, with the British use of the Mafi. They would appoint a designated religious scholar. Yeah. They don't really know anything about the Muslim religion, but they had a process both in Egypt and in Israel where they created in Palestine a Mafi expert, which was basically somebody on their payroll to basically instigate Gladio type style turmoil when they wanted to control people. And that figurehead, like the one that was in Israel, ends up in Nazi Germany working for Hitler. Yes. It was a critical role in the origination of Operation Gladio type tactics that the British used and then obviously implemented after World War II on a large scale basis via NATO. So I just wanted to bring that part up too.
Good point.
So now we get post-World War II, and somehow Turkey, which is certainly not part of Europe, at least on the maps I look at, it gets invited into NATO. And that's a very interesting conversation. We don't have to go into a whole lot of depth there, because that's where it really gets interesting with the Gladio, the stay-behinds. And I think that's an important part of segueing into modern Turkey.
Well, actually, If you
Go
give
ahead.
me one quick second, let me share my screen. I think I can explain just with a quick visual like why I think Turkey was like they did that with Turkey. Let me share my screen and then I'll pass it back to the Colonel.
That's exactly why you're here, my friend.
So if you look right here, here's Turkey. Asia Minor is what it's referred to, like in antiquity. This is Russia up here, and everyone is very familiar now with Ukraine. This is the Black Sea. So the only way that Russia can access the Mediterranean and really the Atlantic, there's two ways. They can either go all the way up here, go all the way through the Norwegian Sea, or they come down here through the Black Sea, and they have to travel through Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, in order to get. So this is a very critical choke point. And so by bringing Turkey into NATO,
Right.
NATO, of course, was created to oppose Russia. They basically have their boot on Russia's throat as far as like them accessing the Mediterranean. So
Hey, Gordon, what's that country in the very far east of the Black Sea?
this would be Georgia.
Oh, Georgia once again coming back into our lives.
That's right.
So
anyway,
that is critical, because as soon as NATO gets stood up, the United States begin immediately engaging in Turkey. Now,
I'll be right back.
What's interesting about the engagement is how it came about, and it was basically total monopoly. The Turkish military was educated, groomed, infiltrated, if you want to use that word, by the United States. And those of us who went to professional military education and looked across the board at all of the different countries and regions and stuff like that, the US's story about Turkey was that they were pretty much like a constitutional republic, much like ours were. The difference was they touted the fact that every time a president in Turkey, this is the way it was explained to us to rationalize this. I want people to understand this is how our military is kind of co-opted into believing this story that's not true. So the way it was explained to us is that because Turkey used to house the Ottoman Empire headquarters, if you will, that there was always going to be a propensity, and there was majority Muslim religion there, to kind of move into be more like Iran and be a theocracy type thing. So the military was there as the safety valve. And if a president got too far into the religious aspect, that the military would stand up and coup them and throw them out of office, kill them, whatever. And then they would gravitate back to a secular type country. And there has been multiple military coups in Turkey's history. And that's kind of the justification, if you will, that we were always given. Oh, well, they were getting too religious, or they were getting too whatever. You find out that because of the Allen Dulles, General Galen relationship and their decision to set up stay-behind units all over the NATO countries, Turkey, because of they became the largest recipient of U.S. military aid of all of NATO. They have the second largest military of all of NATO. They also had the largest presence of Operation Gladio trained assassins / torture / kidnappers, and they were called Grey Wolves primarily. There's a few other entities that were kind of like secret portions of their military, but primarily they were referred to, their stay-behind networks were referred to as Grey Wolves. And just so that everybody understands, they didn't just do domestic terror. Of course, the story was they were set up to oppose Russia, but they never had the occasion because the Soviet Union never tried to invade Turkey. So they used them for domestic terror events. There was also the guy that tried to assassinate. He was actually just giving a warning to John Paul II when he was shot at the Vatican. That was a trained Turkish gray wolf operator that did that.
What year?
I don't remember the year off the top of my head.
It's like
but
late 80s, early 90s, right?
yes. But they were not just used for domestic terror events. That's the point I wanted to make. They were trained to do international terror events as well. And that was kind of based on that Otto Skorzeny model, where he basically would do the training for all of NATO, and then they would export it, because he did operations in South America. He did them. We'll talk about him in a few minutes in the Congo. He was everywhere. And if he didn't personally go, he oversaw mission planning for how especially if it was a head of state that was going to be assassinated. He personally developed some of those, most of those training scenarios in order to execute the mission.
So that brings us into a pretty good background for, where is Turkey today? It's a member of NATO. It's the second largest army in NATO, and they haven't always necessarily played along with the U.S. foreign intelligence plans, especially when dealing with Russia and other areas of the Middle East. I would say when it came to introducing other countries into NATO recently, I think it was Finland that Turkey was, basically the last holdout before, once more encroaching NATO closer to Russia's borders. Turkey has not. They certainly have not been the lapdog of the United States in NATO. They have a voice of their own, and it's a powerful voice.
Erdogan has changed a lot of the dynamics with how Turkey operates within NATO as well. If you recall, the entourage that did the Operation Gladio inside of Russia at the Crocus, that terrorist event, those people trained in Turkey. They were training at a Gladio training site. They left that, went into Ukraine, and they cased the joint. They come back through Ukraine into Turkey, do the final training, and then they left from there back into Ukraine and launched the attack in Russia. After the fact, Erdogan, because we were told that there were cell signals that isolated where they were doing that in Turkey, he went and blew up the training places, because he does not want that happening inside of Turkey anymore. And that's a completely different presence or opinion than what former presidents in Turkey that had been controlled by the West. They were happy to provide those capabilities to NATO. So he has a very different approach to dealing with NATO. And inside of Turkey, they arrested 140 people that had helped with the planning of that operation.
Well, it's interesting. And so that kind of brings us to today. I don't know how mad Russia is with Turkey right now, based on that connection to, what happened with that.
Well, I think had Turkey not done anything in response, they'd be totally mad at them. But Putin understands more than anybody this Gladio operation. He understands. He talked about it quite a bit when he did his interview with Tucker. I think he's probably satisfied with Erdogan's response, because Erdogan's response was to arrest everybody that was associated with it and blow up their capability.
And Turkey's very familiar with color revolution, regime change attempts in his own country, because the 2016 coup, he blamed on America, and yet stayed in NATO.
Well, it was the military generals that did it. That's what I was trying to explain. We train those guys on how to do those things. And then our expectation is they will do it whenever we want them to do it. And the generals have done it in the past, and they tried to do it to Erdogan. Erdogan is the first president ever to thwart what we wanted them to do. First time ever.
I was going to suggest that Egypt did as well. when we tried to install the most recent during the Arab Spring, when the military took over. That was not a pro-American, but your argument's pretty strong, so we don't need to go into Egypt tonight.
No. I meant he was the first one of Turkey's president.
Got it.
Not
Okay.
the first one that's ever. No, Putin's thwarted them. Assad's thwarted them. There's plenty that's out there that's thwarted them. Castro thwarted them, and it wasn't for lack of trying.
Yeah. And well, the other one that just comes to mind that absolutely didn't get thwarted was Pakistan. And that's we know that all of their military is trained by the United States. So I would imagine that's the same way.
Bought and paid for by the CIA.
Well, that's kind of the overall theme we're going to get to with just about everything we talk about.
Yep.
So I brought this up earlier because we talked about Georgia, and Georgia's trying to implement the FARA rule for foreign agent registration. So these non-government organizations that are ostensibly CIA and State Department cutouts can't influence other countries' domestic politics. As we speak, Turkey is talking about doing the exact same. And the question I pose to the two of you is, how is that going to weaken Turkey's relationship with NATO if they pass a FARA type of law, which a number of countries are doing? And you guys can jump into the other countries because Gordon mentioned a couple others.
Go ahead, Gordon.
Gordon, your volume's off.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I had mentioned before Charles de Gaulle. I must have been muted when I said, but Charles de Gaulle, he thwarted many I think 30 assassination attempts.
Yeah, over 20.
Yeah, he had some good security. My understanding is that he brought his own security, which also Putin did that when he came into power. Trump did that when he came into power. Xi did that when he came into power. All three brought their own private security and like integrated them with the Secret Service. But yeah, so these FARA things are fascinating because basically, as far as I understand it, they will effectively ban these NGOs from just kind of coming in and doing whatever they want, which is what they've done. And these NGOs, they are funded. They have lots and lots of money and resources, and so these vulnerable third world countries who, especially in moments of crisis, like a natural disaster, when they're looking for outreach, they're looking for help, they're looking for charity, they open their doors to the Red Cross and to other NGOs that can then come in and basically just have free access to any part of the country they want. And so they become natural vehicles for clandestine operations, and the Colonel can talk about that. But I think by the passage of these laws, you are going to see these leaders targeted who are trying to get them passed, because that's like their golden ticket into all these places is the NGOs. And Qatar, I would put Qatar at the very top of the list. Like, you talk about NGOs, nefarious NGOs operating overseas. Qatar is like the epicenter, the haven of nefarious NGOs.
Well, yeah, and that kind of ties into what is this regime change game plan that we've seen over and over again. Roxanne, what are we up to? Like 76 different color revolutions since the CIA was created?
At least.
I'm at 76 on my list, but and counting, because we have several going on right now. But there's several elements that are always in common.
Do you have Slovakia on there this time? And do you
Not
have
yet.
Congo
Not
on
yet.
there? Yeah. Yeah.
I said, and counting, because it hasn't been 76 successful. How's that? But they have a lot of characteristics in common. They'll contest elections. They'll have NGOs on the ground. They'll get a lot of what seems like popular uprising, but always have foreign influence. Paid agitators, and you have the media amplifying how big of a popular uprising it actually is. You have the Western media saying, "Oh, that's an illegitimate election," and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've got a new regime or a new election. And it happens time and time again. It's exactly what's going on in Georgia today. We're seeing attempts at that in Belarus, which we've talked about. And my question is, if they do that, have they ever taken on a target as big as Turkey, though, and pulled it off?
They took on the United States and pulled it off with JFK.
And maybe again in 2020.
And maybe again in 2020.
I guess this video is not going on YouTube now.
But I did want to mention Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan has a lot of connections to everything going on for some reason. And it also,
What's that? Yep.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Also had to do with the FARA. They are trying to pass that in Azerbaijan as well. And Azerbaijan, if most people probably know, the Iranian president was on his way back from that. The Slovakian president that was just shot 5 times had just visited Azerbaijan, and New Caledonia, who is in the middle of trying to break away and decolonialize itself from France, had some agitators in a crowd there with Azerbaijan t-shirts on. So then, of course, France comes out and immediately says Azerbaijan's trying to interfere with their colony. And what, if any connection there is at all, there was a recent meeting in Azerbaijan that several different smaller countries that were still under colonial rule from Europe had met and was trying to figure out the best approach to get out from the colonial master relationship. And the New Caledonia turmoil that's going on right now, there's fires in the street, there's all kinds. It appears that it is under a Gladio operation as well. And the problem with Gladio operations is you don't know if the people legitimately was just wearing the t-shirts because of Azerbaijan's support in hosting that meeting, not like interfering in it, or if those are paid Gladio operators that is wearing that so that France can say, oh, hey, these guys are interfering here, and so we're going to crack down even harder. So if you're not actually on the streets there, it's hard to discern which of those two things are happening, because one of the hallmarks of Gladio is to dress up like somebody else and pretend like they're instigating it.
Absolutely. Gordon, this map is fantastic because if you start going from east to west, you look at Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria. Now we're talking about Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia.
Correct.
And now Turkey. Pretty much that entire swath of the connection between Asia and Europe has some place where Americans have either had boots on the ground, color revolutions, or some sort of interference or antagonism with. And it's not coincidental that that's one of the 2 routes of the old Chinese Silk Road. It's an incredibly important land bridge between Europe and Asia. And I mean, that map is it's powerful once you understand the history of all those places, not just ancient history, but recent.
Correct.
We've had boots on the ground in almost all of those places.
Yes. Yep. And as Matt and I were discussing on the show last night that aired today, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Let me just grab this real quick and I'll share it. That they are kind of recreating the. This is a little different than the Belt and Road Initiative, but it's certainly connected to it. But they're kind of recreating that and capitalizing on that region. And I'll drop it right here, and then I'll share this tab instead. And so you can kind of get a sense of the nations that are all involved in that, and all the ones that you just named right there. And so let me jump back to the map real quick. And basically, the United States, as far as I could tell, were in the West, like the Western hegemony, I should say. They were trying to establish this axis. They tried to do it, I think, in the 1950s and 60s, and it kind of failed. An axis that runs from Turkey down to Pakistan. So it's Turkey. I think the original coalition was Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. And the one that they're trying to create now is Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and they were trying to get kind of Syria in on it too. And the idea was to get because Syria has a Shia population. Iraq does as well. Iraq I think is actually mostly Shia, if I'm not mistaken, but they're about 50-50. But they were trying to basically create a Sunni Shia paradigm so that they could get the Sunni world, which is basically this entire area of the Middle East and the majority of the Muslim world. It's like 85%, 90% of the Muslim world are Sunni, and then Shia is 10 to 15%, primarily in Iran. But basically, it's like get Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and then maybe Syria to fight the rest of the Middle East, and that was definitely something that was being seeded and being set up. And then MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, he kind of subverted that. Hillary Clinton made a point when she was Secretary of Secretary of the State in 2011 to kick Syria out of. She, manipulated the Arab League to get Syria kicked out of the Arab League. And so the Arab League is like all of these countries right here. Like it's not Iran, not Turkey, because Turkey is they're Turkmen. That's their ethnicity. Iran is Persian. And then Iraq is kind of, you have the Kurds that are all in this region between Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. And then the Arab League is this whole area down here. So MBS then kind of subverts that plan by last year, actually May 20th of last year, invites Assad back to the Arab League summit. Assad, it's like a very, very big deal. Assad shows up, he gives Assad a hug, and then he gives a big speech being like, Syria is a critical part of Arab history, and it's a critical part of Arabia, and we welcome them back into the Arab League, which is true. Damascus has played a huge role in the history of the Middle East, going back to biblical times. So very interesting that he was able to subvert that, and then now you're seeing him kind of team up. Him and Iran have actually seems like they've made friends, even though they have not been friends since 1979. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot to watch. Colonel, you got anything else you want to wrap up on Turkey before we shift to our next topic?
No.
Yeah, there'll be a lot more. I brought up Turkey because we like to get ahead of these things, and we see these signs. Once you know what to look for, it becomes
Correct.
really easy to spot where the NGOs are present, where the elections are being contested. It's rinse, wash, and repeat. So we're seeing
Correct.
that sort of things. But now we've got a situation where it's gone hot recently, and we're going to shift to another continent, down to all the way down to Africa, and the Republic of Congo actually had a failed coup attempt over the weekend. And I think I may as well play a quick 2-minute video on it to get everyone up to speed on it.
Yeah,
and what you're hearing a lot of talk about is, which I find fascinating, is people are already talking about, with the CIA, operatives. Well, apparently the world's catching on to this playbook. But we had Americans involved, and that's why they're blaming it. The failed coup attempt in Congo has brought into focus the arrest of 3 American citizens. And if you can read the headline, who were the alleged, quote, CIA agents? Now, I don't think they were CIA agents. We'll get into that. But let's just go ahead and play this real quick. Okay, so that just tells you what just happened over the weekend, and that does a pretty good job of providing the background of what the American involvement was. What I'd like to do before we start to really break this down, because you guys are going to, these two are going to have a ton of color to add on the subject of the history of Congo. I think the history is important because we're going to see more of this playbook carried out, I think, in other countries going forward. As more and more nations recognize that they're sovereign states and they're tired of the meddling of the imperial Anglo-American rules-based order, as we start to move towards a multipolar world, which may or may not end up being a very good thing for all involved. We'll see how it plays out. That is the storyline these world leaders are talking about quite a bit.
So do you want to wait to talk about what just happened till we finish the history part?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think that's the way we want to do it, because it gets fun.
Because there's some very interesting things that's just come out about those people and the guy that they killed, saying that he was in charge of it. The guy named Matanga.
Yeah. Yep. And I've got some good background on him. And
okay.
Oh my goodness, he's got some, well, all the elements that we look for.
Oh, he does.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to jump into the history here real quick. And I don't think you can talk about Africa without looking at colonial history. And I get to put my Gordon hat on and share a map. Is that one up there? Okay. This is Africa right before World War I. And you'll notice, do I have the right one? Yes, I do. You have the United Kingdom in the orange, which basically South Africa, Egypt, places they had influence, Nigeria. France and Belgium are the ones we're really focused on today. And you get over here to French Equatorial Africa and the Belgian Congo. It's a fascinating story because the Belgian Congo is one of the last of the African areas to ever be settled. It's one of the largest countries in Africa today and back then. There's a fascinating book called King Leopold's Ghost that was given to me 15 years ago. So I've always known a little bit about the history, but Belgium, King Leopold was became the king of Belgium in something like 60 something. And he really believed in European colonialism. He got permission from what was called the, I've got this right here. Give me 1 second. The colonial nations of Europe authorized his claim to create the Congo Free State. And he basically created a private holding company. This is the king of Belgium. And he disguised it as a philanthropy. Once again, using charity to exploit the resources. And the resources there are basically, originally was ivory, and then rubber had an explosion. And he created a bunch of, it was basically slave labor, forced labor going on to get these people to get the people of the Congo to do his, give away everything on their land for slave labor, slave wages. It was probably the most brutal colonial country story that we've seen anywhere. And these people were impoverished for a century because of what Belgium did. Leopold ruled as a private fiefdom from 1884 to 1906. You've heard some great stories about that. Joseph Conrad's book, The Heart of Darkness, we've all seen that movie, exposed that brutality. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote about it in The Crime of the Congo. But they brought attention to it, and international opposition to this and anti-slavery, which was still going on up until the 1890s, forced the Belgian government to turn it back over to the Belgian government, and they created a nanny state, which called from 1906 to 1990, known as the Belgian Congo. It gets decolonized in 1960, and Colonel, please jump in here really quickly.
Yeah. So I want to make a point of what you just said because it's critically important. The king used this country as his plantation. It was his personal playground. He did it under the guise of a charity, as you said, and it wasn't till a long time after he originally set up his plantation as a country. And he reaped all of the benefits. And you need to understand, they had diamonds, gold, copper, uranium. They had so many resources. They have trillions of dollars of resources in the Congo. And this man used it as his own personal plantation. So that's critically important to understand that. In 1960, when they quote unquote gave the Congo their freedom, you also need to understand that there was a massive move throughout the continent to collectively revolt against colonialism. And that gave rise to Patrice Lumumba. And he was very vocal in the leadership of this freedom movement throughout the continent of Africa. And he gets elected the first prime minister of the Congo. And he had lots of ideas. However, the majority, like 90% of the Congo, is resource poor. And one particular state within the country called Katanga was very resource rich. And he was told initially by the Belgium authorities that, and I'm going to paraphrase, basically, we're only giving you your freedom in looks only, because we want to avoid the bad PR. You are not allowed to assign a single officer in the military for the Congo. We're going to leave all of the officers, Belgium officers, and you can only allow the enlisted people to be Congolese. Well, Lumumba says, that's not all right. I'm not okay with that. And they basically told him to pound sand. And the Belgium mining company that was mining the uranium, and keep in mind, this is after World War II, everybody wants uranium because everybody wants a nuclear weapon, right? And the Belgium mining company had already signed a contract a long time before this with the United States, that the United States was going to get 100% of the uranium. And basically the Congo was not going to get anything out of that deal because it had already been a signed contract with Belgium. And Lumumba goes, no, I'm not okay with that either. So he travels to the United States, and basically Eisenhower refuses to see him. And he basically wants to renegotiate with a mining company in the United States directly to benefit the Congolese, because he needs money. He wants to build schools, he wants to build roads, he wants to build hospitals, and he needs money. And the United States government told him to pound sand too. So he's sent home, and he's looking around going, what am I going to do? They still have control of my military, so I can't fight back. They already had started picking a fight with Congo from the Katanga area. So eventually there's like a 100,000 acre NATO base that's established in Katanga around the mines. They are not going to allow him to touch a single resource that Belgium has monopolized, even though supposedly they were given their freedom. And as a result of this, Lumumba sees the writing on the wall, and he picks up the phone and he calls the Soviet Union. He says, I need weapons, I need aid, I need help. It's at that exact second that the United States labeled him a communist and decided that he had to die.
And that's 1965, and enter the stage, of course, is Mobutu.
Well, no, that's 1960. Okay, because the finding to execute him, and this is critically important, the election in 1960 in which so Eisenhower and Richard Nixon is the one, he's the vice president. They're the ones that cook up the scheme to kill him. And it's Eisenhower that signs the CIA finding to murder him. And when JFK, in the January timeframe of 1960, the CIA loves to time these things in the transition to a new president. So Nixon loses the election and JFK is coming into office. It is at that exact time, just before he takes office, that they create the coup, which Otto Skorzeny is personally involved in. And let me give you the name of the operation. QJ-WIN, QJ/WIN. So Otto Skorzeny comes from Spain, which is where he's at, and he travels in country to oversee this operation. And I want to just briefly go over how horrific this is so people understand what these people are capable of. So they decide to kidnap. So the CIA bribes the president. They have a president and a prime minister. The president's kind of a figurehead. The prime minister ran everything. So they bribed the president, who had supposedly had the authority to fire Lumumba. Some people contest that. They fire him. They immediately start searching for him. He gets heads up from his security that they're looking for him. They eventually kidnap him. They take him to Katanga, where Otto Skorzeny's at. They murder him. They bury him. And then they decide a few days later, well, we can't leave him buried intact because they're going to find his body and martyr him. So they dig him up. They chop him up. They dissolve his body in acid. And in 2020, one of the Belgian NCOs that was charged with doing this returned the gold tooth that he had stolen out of Lumumba's dead body to his family in the Congo.
It's a great story. I mean, the brutality. Well, these people, and by any means necessary, I guess, is what we're looking at here. So fast forwarding to get through to the modern day Congo is 65. Mobutu stages a coup, and of course that's backed by U.S. intelligence to a very high degree. The interesting part about Congo, from a geopolitical standpoint, is they were always considered to be allies in the Cold War. Whoever we had in power there was anti-Soviet Union or anti-Iron Curtain. And as you explained, it had to do with the resources.
Because we paid them to be.
Of course. We put them in power.
Correct.
Mobutu actually builds the economy due to a copper boom. He builds a hydroelectric dam. He built hospitals. He built the first TV station that it was used for propaganda. And then, of course, he destroys the economy through corruption and appropriating a lot of the businesses. In 1971, Mobutu changes the name of the country to Zaire. Which is interesting. And we're in the Cold War. And of course, Zaire is now backed by the US, France, and Belgium. There's cronyism like you wouldn't believe. One of the things I thought was fun is in 1975, the foreign debt of Zaire at the time was a total of $887. The following year, the IMF loans them $47 million. To fund that, the government's supposed to cut spending, raise taxes, and put the finances in order. Of course, none of which happens. So by 1990, their national debt is $10 billion. I bring this up because that's one of the other mechanisms that we use to recolonize all these other countries, is we get them in debt to the IMF. And it's exactly what happened in Congo. It's one of the most mineral and resource-rich countries in the world. And yet they're in debt up to their eyeballs due to mismanagement, foreign influence, and the IMF.
Well, you want me to tell you why they do that? Another reason why they do that? They also have a program called UNESCO and at the UN. So they have the World Wildlife Foundation. They go into these countries, and the WWF was set up from this philanthropy. It's another one of those NGO nonprofits that the world uses to manipulate these people. And supposedly they were set up to, when the World Bank goes in and loans these people money and then they can't pay it back, the WWF, out of the benevolence of Prince Charles and Reinhardt, I think is his name, from the Netherlands, who created the WWF and all of their philanthropic buddies. They use WWF money to go in and say, hey, I'll pay off your debt, but you've got to designate XYZ property as forever entrusted to UNESCO. And we basically, or the WWF, and we're basically going to take management of it. The problem was, what you find is many times that designated land was put off limits to the local farmers. They couldn't farm it anymore, even though they'd been farming it for 1,000 years, number one. But number two, they were setting up gladio terrorist camps in these designated areas because they were so large that they could get into the interior. They don't allow anybody on them for privacy perspectives. But the problem is, you had Amnesty International documenting the fact that if they were training people to kidnap and torture people, they were going off to the local tribes and kidnapping people out of them. And they would find entire villages decimated, like mowed down, murdered as a result of this.
Gordon, you got anything to add before we get to the history of the modern? Oops, your volume's off, buddy.
Sorry, I had myself muted. No, that was very interesting. I did not know that. So that's good history.
If you notice, Gordon hasn't been talking much the last few minutes. Just wait a few minutes because we're about to tee him up for some really fun stuff. So we're not ignoring you at all, buddy. I know what you've got to bring tonight. We get up to the 1990s. You got the what's his name? I know this guy's name. Kabila's in power, takes power from Mobutu. You had the Rwandan genocide, had all kinds of Rwandan refugees come into the country. The Rwandans, and that's why I brought up this map. Little Rwanda here in the green, and gigantic Congo have been at war off and on, different tribes for decades now. You had the first Congo War, the second Congo War. Finally, you get a transitional government backed by quote unquote UN peacekeepers. They're corrupt as all hell. So you have more murder, rape, pillage, and plunder. Finally, we get to 2006, and the newly renamed Democratic Republic of Congo holds elections, and the son of Kabila, Joseph Kabila, becomes the democratically elected president. Do I have that right? Yeah. Again, it's the son of a former president. Doesn't sound all that democratic. He's just as corrupt as his father. He serves until 2019. By 2009, there's only 5 countries in the world that score lower than the Democratic Republic of Congo on the UN Human Development Index. And I brought that chart because I think it's interesting. Give me 1 second. I'll pull it up. This is a spreadsheet that talks about the Human Development Index and its components. And if you look at the 193 countries in the world, Congo is one of the bottom 13. You have a life expectancy of less than 60 years. This is as of 2022. You have an average income of about $1,000 a year. And they're basically about as impoverished of a country as you're going to find. You'll recognize some of the other names on here, very similar. Just for giggles, United States ranks at number 21. Average income of about $66,000 per capita. And we actually are making more money than our overall Human Development Index would suggest. And a lot of that's because we've got a very low life expectancy here in the United States compared to our developed country peers. It actually hurts our score. And we're also overeducated and for our per capita. But I thought that was worth sharing, just how impoverished this country is. The average person in the Congo gets about 9.6 years of schooling, expected years. I'm sorry, 7.2 is the mean years of schooling, which basically means if you go to school when you're 5 years old, you're done by the time you're 12. And I don't know about you, but I don't think there's a whole lot of useful skills you can develop in 7 years. And that's part of the big problem. They don't have institutions. They don't have a culture. It's been destroyed by colonialism for 150 years. So that brings us into a modern situation. A guy by the name in 2019. Oh, one of the big things that happened is the China invests about $9 billion there in 2007, and you would expect that to perhaps have a positive impact. If I can pull up the chart here. Here it is. You'd expect that to have a big positive impact to offset the Western colonialism. It didn't. That wasn't necessarily the case. They've been struggling the whole time ever since. This is a where's the right one? Okay, this is from the IMF website. You get all the country data. What you're seeing here is their real GDP in red and their inflation rate in the green. I'm sorry, that's green or blue, whatever color it looks like to you. And it's relatively flat from like 2005 to 2025. Where the China, where is, come on, I had this ready to go. Show you their unemployment rate, which is interesting. And it's not going to load for us because the IMF has a lousy website, but great data. All right, it's not going to be able to show us what I wanted to show you. What you'll see happen is a big spike between 2007 and 2012, where they actually really started to look like they were growing. And it's been going downhill steadily ever since, despite attempts at reform. In 2019, you get a new government, a guy named Felix, one of these names I'm going to brutalize, Tshisekedi, who's still the current president, who's considered a quote-unquote opposition candidate. Now, here's where it gets the similarity with the color revolutions. They disputed the results. The Catholic Church questions the results. There's a big Ebola outbreak right before the COVID outbreak. It took him about 2 years for Tshisekedi to get Kabila's supporters finally out. In the 2023 election, apparently 73% of the opposition candidates rejected the results. Enter the Western world interfering or trying to get interfering. So now we introduce to the story the gentleman who tried to overthrow the guys whose names I cannot pronounce, his government, over the weekend.
Well, can I back up just 1 second?
Please do.
Okay, so I want to introduce Dan Gertler, Gertler. He is an Israeli who is not very well known in Israel at all, but in the Congo, he's very well known because he is the guy that monopolizes all of the diamonds coming out of the Congo. And he's like billionaire. And he also
he's the star of what I'm about to present. So yes.
Okay, well go ahead. Then
Gordon, jump in now, and I'll jump into Malanga.
Yeah. No. The Colonel hit. You hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly who he's the connection between. He's how we connect Mossad to all this, and Mossad is who's behind all of this. I think not the CIA, though they are of course like synonymous.
Correct.
You want to share?
They're cousins.
Yes. Yep. So Dan Gertler, this is who the Colonel just mentioned. He's an Israeli billionaire.
Good looking guy.
Great looking guy, right? And so just to give some context as to who he is, his grandfather is Moshe Schnitzer. And so Moshe Schnitzer is the founder of the Israel Diamond Exchange, which is the largest diamond exchange in the world in 1947. He served as the president of the Israel Diamond Exchange from 1967 to 1993. He served in the Erdogan from 1941 to 1948. In 1948, the Erdogan, along with the three other paramilitary terrorist organizations, became the IDF. Correct. So this is the Erdogan's logo from the 1930s, 1940s. Notice that all of Palestine and all of Jordan are included on that map. Here is a propaganda poster from the Erdogan from 1931. Same thing. You have all of Palestine and all of Jordan. And then here is the current finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, giving a speech on March 19th, 2023, where at this event for promoting Greater Israel, they have the exact same map from the Erdogan on the podium. And so these guys are the ultra orthodox hardliners that we've heard about out of Israel. Netanyahu's grandfather and father were involved in the Erdogan. So these are hardliners for sure, and they're all part of what's called the revisionist movement, which was a Zayev Jabotinsky movement. And the idea was we're basically going to exterminate all the Arabs and all of their land from the Nile to the Euphrates, which would be from Egypt basically to Iraq. All of that's going to become Israel. That was their plan. So jump forward. Gertler is the grandson. In the 1990s, you have here are the maps that Brady was showing earlier, and just to provide a little more color to what Brady was saying, this is basically the same map. The map that you were showing is 1914. This is basically the same one from 1913. You'll notice all the names right here, the different European nations that had colonies here. You'll notice that there's one that is noticeably missing, and that would be Russia. That's because Russia has never had any presence in Africa ever. That changed in 2022. Back in 2017, you had Putin submit in writing a proposal to Sudan. Sudan is over here, marked in red on the east side of Africa. It's just across the water from Saudi Arabia. And they offered to basically become partners with Sudan. And in exchange, they would be able to build a naval base on the Red Sea. And that would be the first military installation Russia has ever had on the continent of Africa. Just to demonstrate how they have been completely like boxed out from the other European nations this whole time. That led to basically the Biden administration freaking out. Well, so many years go by, the Trump administration goes by, and then suddenly it's announced in 2022 that they're considering this offer from Russia, and then all of a sudden Biden decides he's going to appoint a new ambassador. We haven't had an ambassador in Sudan since 1995. We closed the embassy and have not had any representation there. He suddenly decides in 2022 he's going to appoint a new ambassador, and he sends this guy who's a very high-ranking, like senior executive from the State Department to go be the ambassador there. And they warn, and this guy basically brings a warning to, like a thug delivering a warning from the mafia. You better not accept this proposal from Russia. They accept it in February 11th, 2023, and then all of a sudden they have like a coup against them. So anyway, and then right here, this map, these are all the different coups that have unfolded from 2021 to 2023 till now. And it's interesting because you got to wonder if this is this Operation Gladio, or is this, the pushback against Operation Gladio and trying to drive, because we're getting a lot of news stories now about the American bases being shut down, Americans now leaving these African countries. We are now leaving. Our military is now pulling out. So you got to wonder, are the locals taking back their country? Very interesting. So getting back to Gertler, you'll notice on this map, France basically controls Northwest Africa. Britain has all of Egypt down to Kenya, and South Africa up to Rhodesia. And so the Rothschild family tasked Cecil Rhodes with building railroads from South Africa to Egypt, running north and south. And Belgium obviously is going to benefit from that. And then it was the French Rothschild job, like that wing of the family, their job to build railroads from the west coast of Africa all the way over here to Djibouti, modern day Djibouti, which is right across from Yemen. So basically France was running railroads east and west down here to French equatorial Africa. and then Britain was running them north and south. So you got a lot of railroads in the Congo because of that, and Belgium and Leopold benefited from all that. So let's jump forward to 2017. So Gertler, this guy, well, before you get 2017, Gertler in the late 90s sets up these mining operations in Congo. And basically, anyone who's seen the movie Blood Diamond takes place in Sierra Leone in the 1990s.
Love that movie.
Yeah. So that movie basically is kind of loosely connected to like Gertler's family, like their operations. They weren't operating in Sierra Leone, but De Beers was operating there, and De Beers is connected to the Israel Diamond Exchange. But what's portrayed in that movie, that exact situation, like the child slaves, like all that stuff, the brutality, that is happening now in the Congo thanks to Gertler. So Gertler, I mean, the Congo has been exploited, of course, for the past century, but Gertler is setting up these mines. He's bringing all these child slaves, and he's doing it to such an egregious extent that you have these kind of like hegemony institutions like the IMF investigating him, and he's catching a lot of heat. And so you have jump forward to December 20th, 2017. Donald Trump signs Executive Order 13818, blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. By the way, the minerals that they are mining in Congo, in addition to diamonds and copper, cobalt, which is a really, really critical rare earth mineral that's used in a lot of like high-tech manufacturing. So there are 13 people that are targeted on December 20th. One of those 13 people is Gertler. So here's December 22nd, 2017, U.S. sanctions, Israeli mining mogul Gertler over Congo deals. So list of 13 individuals punished for graft and human rights abuses. Because of this whole scandal of Trump targeting Gertler, they freeze all of his assets, all of his like anything that the U.S. government can get their hands on, they seize and they shut down his bank accounts, everything. And basically, because of that, because of the scandal surrounding him, Kabila decides not to run for office in the election at the end of 2018. That's what allows Shisadeki, Mr. T, Felix, we'll call him Felix.
Felix works for me.
Yeah, that's what allows Felix to come in and win this election. So before we get to this really, really juicy story that comes out in 2022, we'll run through these. These stories first. So this guy, before I get to this story, this guy is Yossi Cohen. So Yossi Cohen, he's called the model in Israel because of his looks, and he's very like dapper and whatever. He's like the James Bond of Israel. He was the Mossad. He's the director of Mossad until 2022. He's Netanyahu's like protege. He's heir apparent. He's best friends with Mike Pompeo. It says right here in this article from 2019 that Cohen and Pompeo speak every single week. They talk on the phone. They're very, very close. And so Cohen is also, so when Moshe Shintzner dies in 2007, Bibi Netanyahu gives the eulogy at his funeral. They're very, very close. The Netanyahu family and this family are very close. Gertler is also very close with Cohen.
Remind us, Gordon, what Pompeo's role was with the Trump administration.
Well, before he was the Secretary of State, he was the director of the CIA,
which is basically the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yes, yeah. Exactly.
That's exactly the qualifications I want. Who I want him to be best friends with. Continue, please.
Yes. So this article from April 2nd, 2021, The Misadventures of Mossad Chief Yossi Cohen. This is like starting to disclose all of these weird activities that Cohen is doing, where he's running around the world, but really chiefly Africa. And he is basically gathering up money, and money's changing hands, and he's the one doing it. And remember, he is the director of Mossad right now. He's running around like a bag man, but he's the director of, like, he is the top guy in Mossad. Very, very odd. So then you have this story from July 2021, bribe totaling $360 million. Documents presented by Israeli billionaire Dan Gertler embroil him in one of the biggest graph probes ever. And there, right there, is Kabila. So the reason that Gertler was able to get these mining rights in the 90s is because he became very, very close with Kabila. And basically, Kabila takes Gertler to his father and introduces them. And it's the father that gives him the mining rights to these mines. So these guys are really, really tight. And his name comes out in the Panama Papers, as well as some other leaks that occurred in the 2010s. And that's how all these documents kind of reach these authorities eventually in like 2017, 2019. And so, and then here you go again. Here's another news story. Congo files, cash was deposited into Dan Gertler's accounts. Then millions were transferred to top Israeli figures. So basically, Gertler is raping and pillaging the Congo, taking the money and then giving the money out to all the Israeli, like the money's changing hands to all the Israeli oligarchs. But again, in 2017, Donald Trump seizes all of his bank accounts and shuts them down. So that leads to eventually Felix taking power coming into office in 2019. And because of that, Cohen then with Gertler travels to the Congo 3 times in 2019. The first trip they make, they arrive unannounced. Like, so the 3 times they're going, remember, he is still the director of Mossad at this point. He's showing up to an African country unannounced. He's not contacting their state, their foreign ministry. He's not letting anyone know he's coming. He just shows up with a gift in hand. It says right here, he shows up with a gift in hand, and just out of like courtesy, they grant him an unscheduled meeting with Felix. And he is like, hey, I'm going to help you. He's like, I'd love to help you obtain defense technology. Felix's aides are all there. They're all very weirded out by this. He's like, this is a really, really weird situation. So then he comes back a second time. He's with Gertler too. Like, Gertler is at the meeting. He comes back a second time, doesn't reach out to them or anything. And he's going but they figure out that he's there, and they approach him. They're like, why are you here? And he's like, oh, well, actually, funny you should ask. I would like permission to go speak to Kabila about national security matters of great interest to Israel, if that's all right. And they're kind of like, okay, that's weird. Fine, go ahead. So he goes and speaks with him. He then comes back a third time. That second meeting that they report is October 10th, 2019. Then before the end of 2019, he comes back a third time and does not tell them he's coming. They meet him like on the tarmac. They meet his plane on the tarmac, and they're like, what are you doing here? Like, this is not right. Like, something's going on. They interrogate him like at the airport for a few hours. They bring him to the palace or whatever to meet with the president, to meet with Felix. And in the article, it actually says, I didn't copy that part, but in the article, it actually says that the president's aides believed that or became suspicious that the reason Cohen was in the country was he was gathering up small arms in order to enable Kabila to lead an armed insurrection against the government. That's exactly what it said. This is an article from 2021. I'm sorry, from 2022. So because of that, like they become so suspicious of Cohen during this meeting that they immediately deport him. They don't allow him to leave. They immediately deport him back to Israel. He is now banned from ever coming back to the DRC. He's not allowed back ever again. And just to give everyone a sense of how large the DRC is, this is how big the DRC is. I think it's the largest country in Africa, as far as I can tell.
I looked it up. It's number 2 in square footage, but it's really close to number 1.
Yeah. It's right behind South Africa.
Yeah, very, very large, very, very large country. And so what's interesting about that is that you then have, let me see if I can grab this real quick. So I'll share this tab. So this is the video that was playing over the weekend. These are the operators, U.S. mercenaries that were captured by the DRC guys. One of them was British, by the way, of course.
Can't leave them out of the story, can we?
Yeah, it's like they have to be involved. Yeah, British intelligence has to be involved. And then this is where like the rubber meets the road. Is this person posts a video That's Christian Malonga right there. So Christian Malonga, he's dead now. He was the guy who led the coup.
Well, Gordon, let me give you the background on Christian Malonga before you bring it home.
Yeah,
because I think let me cue that up, because the question is, who would you want to lead a coup? If you have to put a figurehead back on the throne. Colonel, do you have anything you want to jump in with before I talk about Malonga?
Well, I have some information on Malonga, so I'll just compare mine to yours. Go ahead.
I'll do my quick one. He's born in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, moves to Utah at the age of 15 in 1998. So this guy's born in 1983. He gets here and he joins the JROTC, which is U.S. military, Officer Training Corps. So at the age of 23, he starts a bunch of small businesses. So this is a guy who came to America as allegedly a refugee. His father, but he came here with a lot of money. Starts a nonprofit. There it is again, using nonprofits, called the African Helpline Society. Goes back to the Congo in 2006 and joins the Congolese military for 4 years until 2010. Forms a new company in 2011 called Malengo Congo, which is into mining and public works. Public works, of course, being a lot of charitable United Nations type of organizations that he's doing work with. 2011, he attends an opposition assembly to challenge Kabila, who was both indecisive and ineffective. So he then, Malanga then runs for Congress, runs for Parliament. 2 days before the elections, he gets detained. They held him for about 2 weeks, and yet they offer him a position 2 weeks later to become a cabinet level position, being it's called the National Youth President. He declines it. He reports the whole situation to the U.S. Embassy and then returns to the United States. While he's here in America in 2011 or 12, he founds the United Congolese Party as an opposition party, participates in something called the International Religious Freedom Roundtable, which is a very interesting rabbit hole. That's an NGO coalition in Washington, D.C. of about 800 organizations around the world. More NGOs connected with religious organizations, most definitely supported by the Vatican. The United Kingdom starts grooming him as a quote-unquote potential leader in waiting. They send him and his supporters to a political conference in a place called Tbilisi, Georgia in 2016. Yeah, Georgia once again. In 2017, he receives the rank of, quote, Knight of the Order of Saints Peter and Paul in Rome, and receives support from the Catholic Church in the Congo. 2017, this guy's now 34 years old. He's had a really storied life already. He creates an alternative government in exile based out of Brussels. So now he's tied in with the EU. It's called the New Zaire government. He's got a connection to a guy by the name of Benjamin Ruben Zalman Poloun, who in 2015 pleaded guilty to trafficking marijuana, appeared to be through a gold mining company. I believe it's Benjamin Ruben Zalman Poloun was the other guy in that video, right, Gordon?
Yes, yeah, he's one of the guys who got arrested. Yes.
Yeah. So if that's not the profile of somebody who's been groomed from day one or for a very long time to participate and lead some of these color revolution type operations, I don't know what is.
I agree completely. And where's Brussels again?
Well, that would be the capital of the European Union. Oh, but Belgium.
Yes.
Belgium. There you
yes.
go. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And so this video you're watching right now has been playing over and over again. This is a video of Malonga in the West Bank hanging out with the IDF. So that connects him right there to Israel.
Correct.
So he has connections now to the Congo, which would connect him to Gertler, and he has connections to Israel, which would connect him in the IDF, which would connect him to Cohen. So I don't think it's a stretch to believe that Cohen and Gertler were the ones who potentially put him up to the shenanigans this past weekend.
And I think one of them, Benjamin Rubenstein, was one of the people that was involved as well. which of course he was a dual Israeli citizen as well. So yeah, this has got definitely Israel all over it.
Yes.
Agreed. Oh, it's got everything all over it. You've got, I mean, let's just recount everything that's attached to this.
Well, and the fact that he's a U.S. citizen as well.
Yeah, that was under the news. The news channels were trying to confirm that over the last couple of days, whether he was actually a U.S. citizen or not. He sure acted like one, but they couldn't.
I mean, the reports that I saw said he was naturalized, like he was a naturalized U.S. citizen.
Right.
I mean, so like maybe he has dual citizenship. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we seem pretty lax about giving out dual citizenship to people. So
very lax.
It's not like citizenship really matters here anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, you get the fingerprints. But we bring this up because this happens over and over and over again, and it's happening in real time, where all the different elements of foreign interference and nation states and their events, for all the same reasons. You've got charitable organizations, you've got the Vatican involved, you've got Israel, United Kingdom, United States CIA and State Department, you've got the diamond mining, you've got all the different other resource exploitation. It's just colonialism all over again. And there's a reason that I think the global South is waking up to these tactics.
Well, we have found in the research that we do in Gladio that infiltrating religious organizations is one of their favorite tactics. They did it through the Catholic Church in Vietnam for a lot of their initial false flags in the North in order to create the Viet Cong so they could actually have an enemy. The Unification Church of the Moons in Korea, another Gladio organization that was used to guard the poppy fields in South America. A lot of the Moonies are Operation Gladio trained terrorists.
Yeah, next time we get on one of these shows, I'll have to talk about how the CIA connections with the Greek Orthodox Church from post-World War II on, because that's 100% there. It was then, and it still is today.
And do you still have handy the name of the order for the Vatican Church that they awarded him? That's one that comes up almost every single time. That and the Knights of Malta. So it seems to be that the Knights of Malta is the big guys, and the one that you just named are
Order of Saints Peter and Paul.
Yes, that's the one that the kind of middle management guys get.
So this attempted coup, was about 50 people tried to storm, the palace. They actually took it over. About 3 or 4 people got shot. It was one of the more ineffective coups I think we've ever seen.
They're getting desperate.
Perhaps. I hope you're right. But and we don't know what's going to happen next. But this gentleman is no longer with us. He got shot on the spot.
Let me share this too. Let me just add like one more little shade of color to the story I just told about Cohen. This is actually kind of funny. I can't believe I missed this part. So that second visit that he made on October 10th, which they know from like flight logs, that same day, President Felix and his entourage take off to leave from one city to another, and one of the planes in the entourage crashes.
Seems like
the day this guy was at this airport, the day that the director of Mossad was at this airport, one of the president's planes crashes. Yeah.
All right, who wants to bring us home? We're getting up to about 90 minutes, and this has been a great conversation.
You do it.
Yeah, you do it.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you both for coming on. I mean, we've this is a continuation of the story that the three of us have been telling in various different ways in various channels. I think love to have them both of you on here. Colonel, where can we find you?
I'm on X at Colonel Towner, and I'm on Rumble at the Colonel's Corner, and I'm on Substack at the Colonel's Corner.
Fantastic. Gordon, where can we find you?
X is probably the best place to find me. Goes to BPH. I'm also on Telegram. I don't even know what my Telegram name is. I think it's just Goes to Base Patrick. It's Goes to Base Patrick Henry on Telegram. And then also I've been writing. I mean, I'm on Badlands Media. I do a show on Monday morning. I do the news show on Wednesday at noon. I do the history show. And then I also now write for them daily on the Badlands News Brief. So yeah.
And one of the things I read every single morning. I've got my routine. I actually read the Badlands Media News Brief every day. So it's I'll get about, and the way you read it from top to bottom, there'll be a news story or several paragraphs of it, and then someone will start writing a commentary, a reflection on that story. I don't even have to get more than like 2 or 3 sentences to know it's going to be Gordon. I've read so much of your writing, so it's pretty good stuff. I enjoy
Awesome.
that. I enjoy that brief every morning.
I appreciate that.
You can find me, or if you're watching this video on my channel, War Hamster on Rumble is the most likely place to find me. You can get me on Twitter/X at war_hamster1776. If you find me there, you'll probably see half my comments are responding to one of these two. And you can get me on True Social at war_hamster. Guys, thanks a lot. This is fantastic. We're going to try to start doing this on a somewhat of a weekly basis. I'll have more announcements about that soon. But this is the first time I've had the 3 of us together, and I think it went fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, man.